Today's story is about a doll, but this is no ordinary doll. It is considered the most cursed doll on this earth and still exists in this world today. This doll is so dangerous that specific rules have been created to protect against its curse. Visitors are strictly instructed to follow these rules, otherwise anything can happen to them. The story of this doll begins approximately 120 years ago, in the year 1905. In 1905, a couple from Key West, Florida, USA, named Thomas Osgood Otto and Minnie Elizabeth Otto, went to Germany to visit their relatives during their vacation. Originally, they were from Germany, but had later moved to America and settled in Florida. While staying in Germany, one day, as they were passing by, their eyes fell on a doll displayed in a department store. They liked the doll so much at first glance that they decided to buy it for their young son, Robert Eugene Otto, whose 5th birthday was just a few days away. Now, the era of 1905 was entirely different from today. And back then, it was normal for boys to play with dolls. So after seeing the doll, they entered the store and searched for it. But they couldn't find a doll of that exact size anywhere in the store. They found similar dolls in smaller sizes, but not one as big as the one displayed. The doll displayed in the store was 3 feet 3 inches tall, roughly the size of a small 5-year-old child. This doll was made in 1904 by the Steiff Company, the same company that had famously created the teddy bear for the first time in 1902. After the success of the teddy bear, the company went on to create several other toys and dolls. However, this 3 foot 3 inch doll was specifically designed as a display piece because at that time, no one bought dolls of such a large size. This meant it was a unique piece in the entire world. However, Thomas Otto and Minnie Otto liked the doll so much that they had it removed from the display and purchased it for their son. After spending a few more days with their relatives in Germany, they returned to Key West, Florida, with the doll. Their home in Key West was on Eaton Street, and their house number was 534. In that house, apart from the couple and their son, there was also their elder daughter, Miss Ba Otto. To take care of Robert, they had also hired a nanny named Emmeline Ebert, who kept her young daughter Caroline with her. A few days later, on October 25th, 1905, when Robert's 5th birthday arrived, it was celebrated with great enthusiasm. He received many gifts from everyone, but the biggest gift of all was the doll his parents had brought from Germany. Seeing such a large gift, Robert was thrilled. However, as soon as Robert unwrapped the gift and saw the doll, he became so captivated by its eyes that he left all his other gifts aside and took the doll to his room. His parents found this behavior very strange. Soon, Robert stopped eating and drinking properly and spent all his time with the doll. At first, his parents thought it was normal for a child to get attached to a toy, but then they noticed that Robert began spending excessive amounts of time alone in his room with the doll. He would talk to it, play with it, and even sleep with it. He couldn't spend a moment without the doll. After the arrival of the doll, Robert lost interest in all his other toys and focused solely on it as if it had become his entire world. He even gave his own first name, Robert, to the doll and handed over his favorite sailor suit to it. To this day, the doll is known as Robert the Doll and still wears the sailor suit Robert gave it. Now, whenever anyone called him by the name Robert, he would get angry and insist, "My name is Eugene. Robert is the doll's name." Gradually, everyone in the house began calling the doll Robert and the boy Eugene. Over time, their bond grew so strong that it seemed like a friendship between two living beings. This started worrying his parents. One night, Eugene's mother, Minnie, was passing by his room when she heard Eugene talking, as if conversing with someone. She stopped by the door and listened. To her shock, she heard a deep, heavy voice responding to Eugene. Terrified, she immediately opened the door and entered the room, only to find Eugene alone with the doll. When she asked Eugene who he was talking to, he replied, "I was talking to Robert, my doll." Minnie couldn't believe him and asked again, but he gave the same answer. She searched the entire room, but found no one other than Eugene and the doll. This was the first time Minnie felt afraid of the doll. The incident stayed with her, and her fear of the doll began to grow. A year passed, and by 1906, strange events began happening in the house. Objects started breaking on their own, things were misplaced, and whenever something unusual happened, Robert and Eugene were always nearby. Minnie believed her son Eugene was behind all this. However, whenever she questioned him, he would deny it and say, "I didn't do it. Robert did." Minnie's fear of the doll grew stronger, and she started believing that all the disturbances were caused by the doll. One day, in frustration, she snatched the doll from Eugene and locked it in a cupboard, believing that this would solve everything. But Minnie wasn't the only one in the house who felt uneasy about Robert the doll. Others in the household, including their servant George, also experienced strange occurrences. One night, while George was washing dishes, he suddenly heard the sound of a door creaking open. At first, he ignored it, but moments later, he heard the sound of footsteps, as if someone was climbing the stairs. When he went to check, he was horrified. He saw that the cupboard door, where Minnie had locked the doll, was wide open. This was the same cupboard where Robert the doll had been locked away. And then, when she looked toward the staircase, Robert was standing there, but all alone, without any support, staring directly at her. Seeing this, she was terrified and left the house forever, never to return. Time passed, but the strange occurrences in the house didn't stop. Over time, the family members learned to live with these odd happenings. Meanwhile, in the year 1917, Eugene's father, Thomas Osgood Otto, passed away. By then, Eugene Otto had grown up. As he grew older, his interest in toys began to fade, which was natural. Eventually, a time came when he packed Robert the doll into a suitcase, stored it in the attic, and set out to build his career. Initially, Eugene studied architecture, but soon realized his true passion was painting. In the 1920s, he moved to Paris, which at the time was a hub for renowned artists, writers, and painters. Anyone aspiring to be an artist would inevitably find their way to Paris. Eugene followed this trend, honing his painting skills under the mentorship of some great artists and establishing himself as a respectable painter. During his time in Paris, Eugene befriended Annette Parker, a talented pianist from a well-to-do family. Their friendship gradually blossomed into love, and the two decided to marry. On May 3, 1930, Eugene and Annette tied the knot in Paris. Shortly after, they left Paris and settled in New York to pursue their careers. Coincidentally, Annette Parker's career flourished, but Eugene's painting career started to decline. Time passed, and by 1945, Eugene was still struggling with his art. Around this time, news came from West Florida that Eugene's mother, Minnie Otto, was critically ill. The couple left New York and returned to West Florida to care for her. Sadly, on September 14, 1945, Eugene's mother, Minnie Elizabeth Otto, passed away, leaving the house to Eugene. The couple decided to stay there and start afresh, especially since Eugene had found little success in New York. However, this decision turned out to be a grave mistake, particularly for Annette, as she had no idea what lay ahead. The house still contained Robert the doll. Unknowingly, Annette set the stage for the eerie events to resume. While cleaning the attic one day, she found the suitcase containing Robert. Without realizing its significance, she handed it to Eugene, a move that would prove to be her biggest mistake. The moment Eugene saw Robert, he was mesmerized, just as he had been on his 5th birthday when he first received the doll. Eugene began talking to the doll as if he were a 5-year-old child again, leaving Annette feeling deeply uneasy. But this was only the beginning. Soon, Annette started hearing Eugene talking to Robert in his room, much like Eugene's mother had once heard. She too began to fear Robert. By 1950, the fear of Robert had spread beyond the household to the neighbors. Eugene had a circular room at the top of the house where he spent most of his time painting. He would place Robert near one of the windows while he worked. Passers-by, including schoolchildren, claimed to see Robert staring at them. No matter the angle, Robert's gaze seemed to follow them. Some even reported seeing him move from one window to another in the blink of an eye. As a result, people avoided the house altogether, calling it haunted. Guests who visited often reported hearing footsteps or the laughter of a child, though no child lived there. Terrified, they would flee. Even Annette was deeply disturbed by the eerie occurrences. One day, in a fit of courage and frustration, she took the doll and locked it back in the suitcase in the attic, despite Eugene's protests. However, even after locking Robert away, the strange happenings in the house didn't stop. Annette continued to hear unsettling noises. leaving her deeply unsettled. And one night, Anne suddenly disappeared. When Eugene woke up in the morning, he noticed his wife was missing from the bed. He began searching for her all over the house. Suddenly, he heard a knocking sound coming from inside the wardrobe. When he opened it, he found Anne locked inside, crying loudly. She had been trapped in the wardrobe all night. When asked how she ended up there, she said she had heard a sound coming from the wardrobe at night. As she opened the door to check, she felt someone push her from behind and lock the wardrobe from the outside. She believed Eugene was responsible and confronted him, asking why he did it. Eugene denied any involvement, instead repeating his usual claim: Robert did it. Hearing this, Anne was terrified. Coincidentally, the wardrobe in which Anne was locked was the same one where Eugene's mother had first locked the doll, Robert. After this incident, Robert gradually began driving a wedge between Eugene and Anne. Over time, their relationship deteriorated further. They often went days or even weeks without speaking, and when they did, it was only to fulfill basic necessities. In 1965, Eugene Otto was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. He spent the last 10 years of his life in his room, succumbing to madness in Robert's presence. Eugene died on June 24, 1974. After his death, Anne was left alone in the house, but Robert was still there. Unable to bear living with the doll, she sold the house to a neighbor, William Geyser. However, she made one condition: Robert must remain in the house. Shortly after selling the property, Anne moved to Massachusetts, far from Florida. 5 years later, on January 9, 1979, Anne passed away from pancreatic cancer. Meanwhile, William Geyser, who purchased the house, never moved in. He too had heard of the eerie tales surrounding the house and Robert. In 1976, he sold the house to a couple, William and Martell Rutter, who were unaware of Robert's history. The couple moved in with their young daughter, Sarah. When they arrived, Sarah discovered Robert the doll sitting on a chair in Eugene's old room. Delighted by the doll, Sarah took an instant liking to it, unaware of its sinister past. She began playing with the doll, day and night, even talking to it. However, her happiness was short-lived. Unlike Eugene, Sarah played with other toys besides Robert, which seemingly displeased the doll. One night, a strange event occurred. Late at night, while William and Martell were chatting in the living room, they suddenly heard Sarah screaming from her room. They rushed in and found Sarah lying on her bed with Robert sitting on her chest. Sarah was crying and screaming, claiming that the doll had tried to strangle her. Her father, William, dismissed her claims, believing she was imagining things or making up a story. Angered by what he saw as childish behavior, he locked Robert in a suitcase and stored it in the attic. However, just days later, William was found dead in his car, parked outside the house. The car was filled with smoke, and the postmortem revealed that he died from carbon monoxide poisoning. The incident raised questions. Was it an accident, or was it Robert's curse? To this day, the answer remains a mystery. Many believe that Robert took his revenge. Martell Rutter, now a widow, sold the house due to financial troubles. She moved to a smaller house nearby on Von Pfister Street, but took Robert with her. Why she did so remains unknown. She freed Robert from the suitcase, and their bizarre relationship continued for several years. And the date comes, August 18, 1994. On the night of August 18th, Robert suddenly disappears. Mattel had seated Robert on a chair, but he was missing from that chair. Meanwhile, when Mattel went into a room searching for him, the door of the room suddenly closed and locked from the outside. She kept shouting from inside, banging on the door, but the door didn't open. Then, she begged Robert for forgiveness, pleading for him to open the door, and suddenly, the door opened on its own. When she came outside, she saw Robert sitting on the same chair that was outside the room. Seeing this, she decided that enough was enough and that she could not stay with this doll for even one more day. So, the very next day, on August 19, 1994, she donated Robert the doll to the Fort East Martella Museum in Key West, Florida, saying that the doll was cursed and freed herself. But just 101 days later, in a shocking way, she too passed away. This means that everyone involved in this story met a tragic end. Except Robert the doll. Anyway, when the doll arrived at the museum, it was initially kept in a locker room, away from the public. but it was such a powerful thing that no one could ignore its presence, no matter where it was. As a result, strange events started happening at the museum. One day, the water connection at the museum had a malfunction, so a plumber was called to fix it. As he was checking the pipes, he saw a shadow in the darkness. When he shone his flashlight to check, he became so frightened that he lost his composure because right in front of him stood the doll. Terrified, he ran away from there. Apart from this, many other strange occurrences took place at the museum. Sometimes things would go missing, other times objects would move around, and at the end of every event, Robert the doll was found. Gradually, the story of the doll spread, and people started gathering outside the museum to see it. Therefore, they decided to remove it from the locker room and display it in a protective glass case for public viewing. But Robert's story didn't end there, and a new chapter began. It started to seem that visitors to the museum were having different kinds of experiences. Many people saw the doll moving, and some noticed that whenever anyone spoke ill of Robert, the expression on the doll's face would change, as if it was listening to everything. Some people's cameras would lose battery as soon as they got close to Robert, and others' cameras would stop working altogether. Many people who took photos of the doll would find that the photos didn't appear on their cameras. However, when they exited the museum, their cameras or phones would start working perfectly again. It wasn't just camera problems. Some people even had to endure mishaps because of Robert, and their lives started to experience problems. At first, the museum staff thought it was just a coincidence, but as the incidents increased, they realized it was Robert's doing. That's when the museum staff created some rules to protect visitors from his curse. The first rule was that whenever you meet Robert, you must introduce yourself first, saying hello and stating your name. The second rule was that you should always treat Robert with respect, speak to him politely, and never make fun of him, because doing so could ruin your life. The third rule was to always ask for Robert's permission before taking a photo. Never take his picture without permission. The fourth rule was to say goodbye before leaving and cut off all ties with him, which would save you from his curse. But there are always people who don't believe in these rules, who think they are too cool to follow them, or who deliberately do the opposite of what they are told. Such people ignored the rules, and later they suffered consequences. Thousands of people were affected by the doll's curse. Many lost their jobs, many had accidents, and strange events started happening in their homes. People started seeing spirits at their homes and lived in constant fear. It is even believed that Robert was responsible for some deaths. The list of people blaming him is long. Soon, letters started arriving at the museum, followed by emails and messages on social media, as people realized their mistakes and begged Robert for forgiveness, hoping that their lives would return to normal. Later, many paranormal experts who investigate ghosts or spirits visited the museum, and all of them confirmed that Robert possessed some kind of power. They found that when they brought a K2 meter, a tool for detecting spirits, near Robert, it started showing activity. When a photographer who was taking photos of ghosts reached Robert to take his photo, the results shocked everyone. Aura, which is an energy field present in every living being, whether human, animal, insect, or plant, was detected around Robert. The camera, which creates a map of the energy field, can usually only detect living things. But surprisingly, it created a map of Robert too. This astonished the experts. After this, Cindy Kaza, a renowned expert in communicating with spirits, was called to learn more about Robert's mysteries. As soon as she approached Robert, she felt that there were many powers connected with him, and not just one spirit, but several spirits. She believed that Robert was a portal created by dark magic to attract spirits, particularly those with unfinished business. These spirits gradually attached themselves to the doll, especially children's spirits, who were drawn to it. Cindy Kaza stated that closing this portal was very difficult because no one knew how it was created. She also explained that not all the spirits connected with Robert were evil, but there was one particularly angry spirit that caused harm and terror. This was the spirit that caused people's misfortune. Based on all these observations, there's no doubt that the doll is cursed, whether it's the aura photo, the paranormal experts' opinions, or the numerous bad experiences of people. If only one or two people had these experiences, it might have been considered a coincidence. But the stories of misfortune surrounding Robert are numerous. But the question arises, how can a doll be cursed? There are two main reasons for this, one based on belief and the other a very old story. The first reason is based on a belief that, according to many old tales, when we give our name or clothes to someone, we are giving them our identity, especially when we do this for a doll or a figurine. By doing this, we transfer our life energy into it. Robert Eugene Otto, when he gave the doll its name, Robert also promised that it would be known by this name from now on. It is believed that this is why the doll came to life. The second reason is a story, which is commonly known, and Cindy Kaza also mentioned it. The story involves Eugene's nanny, Emmeline Abbott, and her unfinished goals. She had a daughter named Caroline, who was the illegitimate child of Emmeline and Eugene's father, Thomas Otto. Caroline died when she was young in the Otto family house, and the doll was also present in the house at that time. It is said that when Emmeline's daughter died, she became angry with the entire Otto family. Being familiar with dark magic, Emmeline decided that if her family would not survive in peace, neither would Thomas Otto's family. She cursed the doll with dark magic because she believed that the family's negligence led to her daughter's death. It's said that Caroline's spirit connected with the doll due to this curse. According to Cindy Kaza, this is not just a story, but the truth. Whether you believe in ghosts, spirits, or curses, or call it superstition, the letters, emails, and messages of those affected are proof. The truth is that you won't believe it until it happens to you. Robert the doll still resides in the Fort East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida, where it has been for almost 30 years. So if you live in America or Florida, or if you ever visit Florida, make sure to visit Robert the doll and share your experience. But remember the rules before meeting him, and if you don't have anything good to say about him, stay silent, but don't speak badly. Robert will know. This was the story of the world's most cursed doll, Robert the doll.